World leaders converged on Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, this week for the COP27 climate conference. The UN gathering will wrap up later this week, but let's discuss what has and hasn't been accomplished so far. Joining me is Bill Weir, CNN's chief climate correspondent. Always great to see you, Bill. So let's talk about what the deliverables that came from President Biden when he spoke. He noted that the U.S. would meet its own emissions targets by 2030, a $369 billion commitment to clean energy initiatives in the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as new methane rules. How was this all received by the crowd there and by experts?
I think the sentiment is, wow, it's such a great change given the predecessor, given the tone of the Trump administration. But I think the consensus is America's ambitions don't go nearly far enough to meet the problem. In terms of meeting his goals by 2030, he says, the U.S. is on track for that. The more important goal is the idea that we pin this cut to the year that the U.S. started moving off of coal, right, 2004. So the goal is to cut it by 50% from that year by 2030. 35% is about what the current policy will get us to. The Inflation Reduction Act gets us to about 45%. So even all in, the U.S. is falling short. But really, to be fair, the rest of the world is as well. Glasgow, everybody made a promise we're going to come back to Sharm el-Sheikh with more ambitious plans, and only a tiny percentage of the countries in attendance actually did that. And the world is a very different place now with Putin's war and the energy shocks that came out of that as well. Big oil is making record profits right now and still getting so many in trillions or billions in subsidies every year. And you're seeing countries like Costa Rica, who tried to join with Denmark last year and be the first countries to lead the way beyond oil and gas. Costa Rica announced they're pulling back from that as well and thinking more about deforestation and other less challenging issues. So it's a heavy lift for Joe Biden. And he also had to kind of step up and reach for the check when it comes to loss and damages as well.
Right. And on that issue, there's been a somewhat controversial idea raised and floated that richer, more developed Western countries that have spent years profiting off of fossil fuels and becoming wealthy off of them should somehow pay money to countries that are richer, that are poor, and that have suffered firsthand and are seeing it on their daily lives from climate change. We're seeing some of these countries contribute $5 million, $10 million, $50 million here. But as you know, that's just a drop in the bucket when we're hearing from experts that this will require trillions of dollars worth of investment. Where does the United States stand on this issue?
Well, it has long resisted any sort of loss and damage agreement. Over a decade ago, the countries agreed this is the right thing to do. Not only are countries like the Bangladeshs of the world or Pakistan, which a third of the country was flooded, they had tiny carbon footprints historically. Some of those countries were exploited for the very fossil fuels that are then coming back and biting everybody, right? So it's a double jeopardy for them. What's sort of bubbling to the surface now, John Kerry floated this thing this week, and Gina McCarthy, the climate czar, basically acknowledges it comes down to Congress. If Kevin McCarthy is the new Speaker of the House, or Republican is, it makes it much harder to get all of these promises out the door. So in order to meet these obligations and step up, she's saying, Envoy Kerry is working with the private sector to come up with some sort of maybe an insurance scheme. Germany seems in on this as well. So the rich countries of the world basically buy insurance for the poorer countries. That won't go over well in a lot of places where they see that as just profiting even more off of the folks at the bottom of the economic pyramid. But if it's the only thing that the rich countries are talking about, it's better than nothing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out the rest of this week.
Will you be watching this meeting between President Biden and President Xi in the final seconds we have remaining here, Bill? On this issue specifically, you've got a meeting, not only the two largest superpowers, but two largest emitters of greenhouse gases.
Exactly. Solar prices in the U.S. fell 90% in just 10 years. They're cheaper than any other energy form now. And a lot of that has to do with Chinese manufacturing. And now this new sort of trade war, this new stance from China, they want to maybe build their own solar panels for a change, which would shift the supply chain to maybe other Asian countries. He's in Cambodia, Vietnam maybe could take some of that supply chain, but that takes time. And obviously,
we'll see if it comes up. We unfortunately are out of time, Bill, but thank you so much. We appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in this week. Fareed will be back next week right here.